the role that the big food retailers have in our food security is actually pretty key, and it's also pretty impressive. I think it's interesting because the main part of my work has been with small businesses, because as well as being an innovation consultant helping very large businesses, I've got a small venture capital company, and we invest in startups. So we've got about 26 businesses in our portfolio, and what's been remarkable is how differently every one of those has been impacted. So every conversation I have, even if it starts with the same question, within a minute has gone off in yet another different direction. So I'm pleased to say most of them are actually in pretty good shape, and some of them are in very, very good shape because they've been able to exploit some great opportunities that have come up. However, of course, then others are in very difficult positions. With every one of our businesses, we've tried to ensure that there's a path to ensuring that there's cash runway for 12 months, because we don't see the funding environment as being very positive at all until at least the first quarter next year. So we're just being kind of super realistic about that, and cash conservation is key. And then from a kind of a demand planning perspective, and thinking about kind of marketing activity and getting proactive about stuff, it's much more about the next 4 to 12 weeks. And then with half an eye to some different scenarios as to how we could come out of lockdown. But I try and make sure that none of our businesses are kidding themselves so they can actually predict what's going to happen. So all we can do is just think about a few different things that may happen and create some activity about those things so that we're ready for if and when that happens, but not trying to kid ourselves that we know what will happen, and just making sure that we're super flexible with everything. Reasonable sized teams, so in some cases they are using furlough. Actually, one of my businesses, they furloughed a team for 3 weeks, but actually they've taken them back on after 3 weeks.
Wow.
So, which is kind of quite encouraging. It was a sales team. They just thought that they just were going to struggle to have any kind of conversations with retailers and with other distribution outlets. But actually, 3 weeks, it was a bit of a hiatus. But then actually your conversation started to open back up again. So they've been brought back into the business. So a few of them are using furlough. The CBILS, the coronavirus business loan scheme, has just been a bit of a wet squib. That's been a bit of a disaster, really. We've said to our businesses, frankly, unless we were considering a loan arrangement before, then that's really opened up many more options. Bounce back loans, which have only gone live 3 days ago, that's a different situation. They seem to be coming through quite easily, and we're encouraging our businesses to take those regardless, because it's just, it's up to 50 grand dependent upon turnover, and it's 0 interest for 12 months, and then it's a low 2.5% interest rate after that. Even if they don't need it right now, it can contribute to their cash runway that I was talking about earlier on. Okay, so it's sensible contingency, and we're saying that, look, even if you don't need the cash right now, put it into a business savings account, earn 1% on it. I think it's actually healthy for everybody to realise that the role that the big food retailers have in our food security is actually pretty key, and it's also pretty impressive. And I think it's, I've had a few conversations where people have kind of genuinely been a bit fascinated by actually, well, why is it that toilet rolls have run out? You know, and they kind of get into a conversation about, well, what is the consumer behaviour that's driving that, and what actually happens in the supply chains of these big, you know, big supermarkets and big food, big, you know, FMCG businesses. And I think it's great that people are kind of waking up to they shouldn't really take that for granted, because these are incredibly impressive businesses. And also, actually, just from a slightly nationalistic perspective, our supermarkets are the best in the world. So, you know, we are recognised. It wasn't just Napoleon that thought we're a nation of shopkeepers. You know, we are recognised the world over as being great retailers, and our supermarkets are amazing. So I think it's just good that we recognise that. I think the government has also had a bit of a wake-up call, that you could see that they weren't communicating with the industry very well at the start, and then they kind of realised that actually it was industry that was going to help us to A, cope, and B, come out of this. I think they've done a pretty amazing job, because they've had to have a bit of a mindset shift, and they've spent the last 20 years chasing efficiency and optimizing supply chains, or, you know, what I would term the optimization fetish. And what they've realized, and what this has thrown into stark relief, is that that's great when, you know, when things are normal, but it has caused some problems when things kind of go off the rails. And so flour is a great example of that. The overall demand for baked goods has not increased. So there's only so many calories that you can consume of bread and cakes, etc. But where we are consuming those calories has changed, and how we're consuming them and how we're baking them has changed. So we're doing that in the home rather than, you know, grabbing a sandwich with coffee or a cake, you know, in the cafe or whatever. And so the overall amount of flour that we need in the supply chain hasn't changed, but where we need it and how it's packaged has changed. So it's the packaging element of the supply chain, the retail packaging element of the supply chain, that has become the bottleneck. And flour has gone from something that you could predict very accurately, because, you know, it doesn't really change with the seasons much, maybe a little bit at Christmas, but, you know, very, very easy to predict what flour demand is going to be. But then there's this huge, what supply chain people refer to as the bullwhip effect, of a huge extraneous impact on volumes and forecasts and everything. And it takes a hell of a long time to work that through the system when your supply chain is set up to be completely optimized around regularity. The shock is huge, and that's what we're seeing. So we're still trying to get flour back into the system. I'm not sure it will mean that much. I think there will be a consciousness of contingency and the need for contingency. So, for example, I think it was great, actually, just last week, Dave Lewis from Tesco was talking about the kind of contingency scenario planning that they do within Tesco, and their last big exercise was in January, and he was talking about what that practice had meant for the business, and it kind of put them on a good footing. So I think they'll continue to do that, and I think some other retailers will probably think they need to do a better and more regular job of contingency planning. But I don't think it will fundamentally change the optimization fetish, because these businesses have to. We, as consumers, we demand that they run lean, because we're demanding low prices. So we won't stand for any supermarket giving us food price inflation. It's just uncompetitive. So they'll continue to optimize, but there will be, I think, a more of a role around contingency and scenario planning. And what was really interesting about this period is, and I've been saying this to a lot of the businesses that I work with, is that it's long enough to develop new habits. And yeah, if the lockdown had been, just kind of 10 days or 14 days, that's not a period where people lose old habits and gain new habits. But because this has been going on for 6-7 weeks already, and will probably, largely for a large number of people go on for a few more weeks, it's the length of time where you can lose old habits and gain new habits. So for me personally, I've become, it's been great from exercise. I've been much more habitual on exercise because I can just manage my time better, and also I'm kind of conscious that's what gets me outside as well. So there's a real incentive to exercise. But that's a habit that this period has helped, and I hope to continue. I think other people will have habits that they've been able to drop. Alcohol is an interesting one because addictive habits are, of course, harder to drop. They're also easy to pick up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a whole thing around alcohol which will be very different for different groups of people. Cool. And we'll see different things happen.